For as long as I can remember, London had always been a city living inside my imagination. Even when I was a child, I would close my eyes and picture it. The tall, proud clock of Big Ben standing over the River Thames, the red double-decker buses rolling past crowded streets, and the city lights sparkling at night like stars brought down to earth. London felt like a magical place where stories were real, where dreams could come true, and where every street corner seemed to whisper history. I never thought I would actually go there. London was far away. It was expensive. It was full of people I had never met, speaking accents I had never understood. Yet, somewhere deep in my heart, I carried one simple truth. I wanted to go there. One day, I would go there. Years passed, and that dream did not fade. It stayed with me through school, through work, and through quiet evenings at home. Sometimes I would sit at my desk, open a notebook, and write down everything I imagined doing in London. I imagined walking along the Thames, visiting the museums, seeing the London Eye, and eating the food from little cafes. I imagined speaking English with confidence and learning new things every day. One morning, I looked at my reflection in the mirror and said to myself, "It is time. I am going to London." Saying it out loud made it feel real, like a promise I could no longer ignore. I had decided. The dream was becoming a plan. Preparing for the journey was not simple. I needed a passport first. Holding that small blue book in my hand for the first time felt surreal. It seemed so ordinary, yet it was my key to another world. I imagined stamps filling its pages, each one marking a memory, a city, a journey. Next came the visa process. Forms, photographs, letters, and waiting. It tested my patience, but I knew that every step brought me closer. Weeks later, when I finally held my stamped passport, a rush of joy and relief filled me. The world was opening up. Then I needed a ticket. Sitting in front of the computer, I searched for flights to London. The options were endless, prices fluctuated, and each choice felt heavy with possibility. I finally clicked book on a flight that would take me from my home country all the way to Heathrow Airport. My heart raced, and for a moment, it felt like my life was about to change forever. Packing was a task full of both excitement and uncertainty. I opened my suitcase and stared at it. What do you bring when you are about to enter a dream? Clothes. Of course, a warm jacket. Shoes for walking. A few nice outfits for exploring the city. A notebook to capture memories. My phone and charger to stay connected, and small gifts for people I might meet. I folded each piece of clothing carefully, imagining the first morning I would wear it in London. Everything felt symbolic, as if each item carried a part of my courage and hope. Asterisk, asterisk. The night before the flight, sleep seemed impossible. I lay in bed, listening to the soft hum of my room, imagining the streets of London, the sounds, the smells, the faces I would see. My suitcase waited in the corner, and my passport lay on the table, silent but powerful. My mind raced with excitement, nerves, and anticipation. I realized that this journey was not just about leaving home, it was about stepping into a new life. Morning arrived with a golden light spilling into my room. My family accompanied me to the airport, smiles on their faces but hints of sadness in their eyes. Leaving home, even for a dream, carries a weight. Hugs were longer than usual, and the goodbyes lingered. Then I stepped forward, my suitcase rolling beside me, and entered the airport. Airports are full of energy. Announcements echo through the halls. People rush past with suitcases in tow, and the smell of coffee and pastries drifts everywhere. I checked in, went through security, and found my gate. Each step felt like a ritual, each movement closer to the unknown. When the boarding call finally came, I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, and walked down the jetway. The airplane felt enormous, almost like a moving city. I settled into my seat by the window, trying to hold on to every ounce of calm I had left. The engines roared, the plane began to move, and soon we were rising into the clouds. The city below became smaller and smaller, until it was only a pattern of lights and roads. I whispered to myself, "London, here I come." The flight was long, almost 10 hours. At first, I stared out the window, mesmerized by the endless clouds and the tiny lights below. But soon, the excitement gave way to fatigue. The attendants brought food, and although it was nothing fancy, it felt special to eat at such a height, so far from home. I tried to sleep, but my thoughts wandered endlessly. The sights I would see, the streets I would walk, the new words I would learn, and the people I would meet. After hours of anticipation, the captain's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, We are now approaching London Heathrow Airport. Please fasten your seatbelts. My heart jumped. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The first real step into the city that had lived in my dreams for so long. The plane touched down smoothly, and I pressed my face to the window, eager for my first glimpse of London. The airport was huge, bustling with travelers from every corner of the globe. I collected my suitcase, passed through immigration, and heard the words that felt like music. Welcome to London. I smiled, wide and uncontainable, and stepped through the doors. The first breath of London air was cool, refreshing, and slightly different from home. Outside, taxis lined up along the curb. People walked quickly, their conversations a symphony of accents. The city felt alive, urgent, and exciting. I took a deep breath and walked forward, my suitcase rolling behind me, my heart full of awe. My first taxi ride was an adventure in itself. The driver, a cheerful man with a thick London accent, asked me questions about where I was from and why I had come. I answered, sometimes stumbling over words, but he smiled and nodded, encouraging me. The streets whizzed past small cafes, with pastries in the windows, markets with colorful fruits, old brick buildings, and modern glass towers. Every moment felt surreal. Finally, I arrived at my hotel. It was modest but comfortable, with a warm glow from the lights inside. The receptionist welcomed me kindly and helped me check in. I took the elevator to my room, opened the window, and looked out. The city stretched before me, full of possibilities, full of life. I could see lights reflecting on the Thames in the distance, hear faint sounds of traffic, and smell the faint aroma of baked goods and coffee from nearby cafes. It was perfect. I unpacked quickly, but I could hardly sit still. I wanted to see the city, even at night. I walked down the streets, careful with my suitcase, absorbing everything. The lights reflected on wet pavement from a light rain, and the city felt like a living painting. People passed by, some speaking quickly, others laughing, some carrying bags, others walking alone. I noticed little details, the style of the street lamps, the patterns of the brick walls, the music coming from a nearby cafe that night. I sat on a bench near the river, watching the water flow under the bridges. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the long flight, the nervous excitement, and the dreams I carried. I realized that London was more than a city. It was a feeling, a combination of history, people, and energy that inspired you without even trying. I made a promise to myself. I will make the most of every moment here. I will learn, explore, and grow. The next morning, I woke early, eager to begin my real adventure. The city looked different in daylight. The streets were alive with people going to work, children in school, uniforms walking past, cyclists weaving through traffic. I walked slowly, letting each moment sink in, noticing the small things. The street musician playing the violin, the aroma of fresh bread from a bakery, the chatter of people in cafes. I took the underground for the first time. It was a maze of tunnels and trains, but the signs were clear, and soon I felt confident navigating. The ride was crowded, but I smiled at the passengers, some nodding back. I realized that this was part of the experience, moving through the city like a local, learning its rhythm. My first stop was the Tower of London. Standing in front of it, I felt a shiver. History surrounded me. I imagined the kings and queens, the soldiers, the stories that had unfolded within those walls. I took photos, but more importantly, I took mental notes. Every detail, every moment, felt like part of my story now. From there, I wandered to the Borough Market. The smells, the colors, the sounds, it was overwhelming but wonderful. I tasted fresh bread, sampled cheeses, and bought a small souvenir to remember the moment. Every interaction, every small purchase, felt like a tiny victory, a way to belong. In this new city, by evening, I walked along the South Bank. Watching the London, I slowly turn against the pink and orange sky. The lights reflected on the water, and I realized that I was living a dream I had held for years. I felt a deep gratitude and a quiet pride. That night, back in my hotel room, I reflected on the day. Every sight, every sound, every small interaction was teaching me something new. London was not just a place to visit, it was a city that asked you to notice, to feel, and to grow. I wrote in my notebook about everything I had seen, from the streets to the markets, from the people to the history. I wanted to remember every detail because these memories were now part of me. As I fell asleep, I thought about tomorrow. There were so many places left to explore, so many people to meet, so many experiences waiting for me. I realized that this journey was not just about London. It was about discovering a new part of myself, and in that quiet moment, I knew that the adventure had only just begun. The morning sunlight streamed through the window of my hotel room, gently waking me from a deep sleep. London had already begun to stir outside. The streets were alive with the rhythm of the city footsteps, bicycles, buses, and the chatter of people hurrying to work. I felt a familiar flutter of excitement in my chest. Yesterday had been magical, a first taste of the city, but today promised something deeper. Today, I would not just see London, I would begin to experience it. I started my morning slowly, brewing a cup of tea in my room. Even though tea was a simple drink, something about drinking it in London, with the sound of distant traffic and the smell of fresh bread from nearby bakeries, made me feel connected to the city. I opened my notebook and wrote down my thoughts, recording the smallest details: the cool morning air, the way the sunlight bounced off brick buildings, the faint hum of the underground trains. Writing had become a way to anchor my memories, to make them last longer than just the fleeting moments of the day. By mid-morning, I was ready to step outside. My first destination was Covent Garden. I had heard about it in so many books and travel blogs, a lively area full of street performers, small shops, and cafes. As I walked, I noticed how different London felt during the day. The city was alive, bustling, but in a calm, organized way. People moved with purpose, yet there was space for laughter, music, and conversation. As I entered Covent Garden, I was greeted by the sound of a violin echoing through the cobblestone streets. A street performer played with a passion that drew a small crowd. I stopped to watch, feeling a sense of joy I could not explain. There was something magical about watching someone create music in the middle of a city street. And I felt that London was full of these little wonders, waiting for anyone curious enough to notice. I wandered into the small shops, each filled with unique items: handmade jewelry, colorful scarves, vintage books, and curious trinkets. One shop had shelves filled with tiny models of famous London landmarks. I picked up a small replica of Tower Bridge and held it in my hand, imagining seeing the real bridge in person soon. I smiled, realizing that these small souvenirs were not just objects, they were reminders of moments, feelings, and experiences I wanted to carry with me. By lunchtime, I was hungry, and I found a small cafe tucked in a quiet street. The menu was simple: sandwiches, pastries, and fresh juice. I ordered a sandwich and a cappuccino and sat near the window, watching people pass by. Every face told a story. A woman walked by with a bright red coat and a small dog on a leash. A group of students laughed, their voices echoing down the street. A man paused to look at a shop window, lost in thought. London was full of people living their stories, and I felt honored to be a part of it, even if only as an observer for now. After lunch, I decided to explore the Thames. I wanted to walk along the river, see the bridges, and feel the city from its edge. The riverbanks were lively, with joggers, tourists, and families enjoying the day. I walked slowly, taking in the reflections of buildings on the water, the boats gliding past, and the seagulls circling above. The sound of the water and the chatter of people created a rhythm that felt like the heartbeat of the city. As I walked, I noticed a small group of people gathered around an outdoor cafe, sharing a moment of laughter and conversation. I realized that one of the joys of London was how it allowed strangers to share small experiences together, even if only for a few minutes. I made a mental note to return to the cafes later, to sit and observe, and perhaps even strike up conversations with locals. In the afternoon, I visited the British Museum. I had read about it countless times, but seeing it in person was different. The grand entrance, the massive columns, and the vast interior filled with treasures from around the world took my breath away. I wandered through the exhibits, marveling at artifacts from ancient civilizations, delicate sculptures, and intricate paintings. Each room was a story, a window into a time and place far away. I spent hours there, moving slowly, reading the descriptions, and imagining the lives of the people who had created these objects. At one point, I sat on a bench in the middle of the museum, closed my eyes, and tried to absorb everything. The quiet hum of visitors, the soft footsteps on the marble floor, and the hushed conversations created a peaceful rhythm that made me feel connected not just to the past, but to the city itself. Leaving the museum, I felt both amazed and humbled. London was a city that held history and culture in every corner. It was a reminder that travel was not just about seeing new places, but about learning, understanding, and growing. By evening, I returned to the streets, this time heading toward the West End. I wanted to experience the theater district, to feel the energy of lights, billboards, and crowds. The streets were alive with excitement, and I felt a rush of anticipation. I had bought a ticket to a small play in a local theater, and the thought of sitting among locals, watching a story unfold, made my heart beat faster. The theater was small but beautiful, with red velvet seats and golden accents. The performance began, and I was immediately drawn in. The actors' voices, the set design, and the story itself created an experience that was both moving and inspiring. I realized that this was part of London's magic. Art was everywhere, waiting to touch those who sought it. When the curtain fell and applause filled the room, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I was experiencing something I had only dreamed about, and it was more wonderful than I had imagined. Walking back to my hotel that night, I felt both tired and exhilarated. The streets were quieter now, lit by the soft glow of street lamps. Paused to look at the London Eye, its lights reflecting on the river, and felt a quiet joy. London was no longer just a dream, it was a reality, a living city that welcomed me into its rhythm. Over the next few days, I settled into a routine of exploration. Each morning, I would wake early, grab a simple breakfast at a nearby cafe, and set out to discover something new. I visited local markets, where vendors sold fresh produce, handmade crafts, and delicious street food. I learned the names of small streets, the schedules of buses and trains, and the flow of pedestrian traffic. Every small detail helped me feel more at home. I also began to meet people. In a small park near my hotel, I met an artist sketching the cityscape. We started talking, and soon I learned about his favorite spots, hidden cafes, and tips for seeing London like a local. Another day, in a bookshop, I struck up a conversation with a young woman who shared my love for writing. We exchanged recommendations, and even promised to meet again at a cafe later in the week. These encounters, small as they were, made me realize that London was more than its buildings and history. It was about its people. One afternoon, I decided to take a longer journey, riding the Underground to Camden Town. I had heard about its markets and unique culture. Exiting the station, I was greeted by a maze of colorful streets, music, and aromas of food from around the world. I wandered through the market, tasting unusual snacks, looking at vintage clothing, and listening to street performers. It was a vibrant, chaotic, and joyful place, completely different from the structured elegance of Covent Garden or the historic calm of the British Museum. Camden showed me another side of London, a side full of life, creativity, and surprises at every corner. By the time I returned to my hotel, my feet ached, but my heart was full. Each day brought new experiences, new sights, and new people. I wrote in my notebook about everything: the sounds of the market, the taste of a freshly baked pastry, the laughter of children playing in a park, the conversation with a local artist. These were the memories I wanted to keep forever. As the week progressed, I began to notice small changes in myself. I spoke English more confidently, navigating conversations with shopkeepers, taxi drivers, and fellow travelers. I noticed the difference between the English I had learned in books and the English spoken in the city: the expressions, the slang, and the rhythm of speech. At first, it was challenging, but slowly, I adapted. Each successful interaction gave me a small boost of confidence. I also began to understand the city more deeply. London was a city of contrasts, historic and modern, quiet and busy, formal and playful. One street could lead to a centuries-old church, while the next turned into a vibrant street market. The city invited exploration, curiosity, and patience. I realized that traveling was not just about sightseeing, it was about observing, learning, and connecting with the world around you. Evenings became a time for reflection. I often returned to the river, sitting on a bench, watching the lights, and thinking about everything I had experienced. The days were full, sometimes exhausting, but I felt alive in a way I had never felt before. I wrote pages in my notebook, recording not just facts but feelings: the excitement of discovering a new place, the nervousness of speaking with strangers, the joy of finding hidden corners of the city. London was teaching me, shaping me, and I was eager to learn everything it had to offer. Over the next few weeks, my adventures expanded. I visited the Natural History Museum, marveling at the massive dinosaur skeletons and intricate exhibits. I explored Notting Hill, with its colorful houses and quaint streets. I walked along the South Bank at sunset, watching performers, families, and tourists enjoying the view. Each experience was layered with small details: the way the light hit the buildings, the sounds of the city at different hours, the taste of local treats, and the friendliness of people I met. that I even tried traditional English food, fish and chips from a small takeaway, a hearty pie from a local bakery, an afternoon tea with scones and jam. Every meal was a discovery, a connection to culture, and a small joy. I noticed how people enjoyed food differently, how they shared meals, and how these rituals added to the life of the city. London had become more than a destination, it had become a teacher. Every street, every conversation, every moment taught me something new. I learned patience from waiting in lines, observation from watching people, courage from speaking English, and gratitude from experiencing the beauty of life in a new place. By the end of part 2, I felt a deep sense of belonging. Not home, but belonging in the sense that I had become part of the city's rhythm. I had walked its streets, spoken its language, tasted its food, and listened to its stories. London was no longer just a dream, it was a living, breathing reality, and I was fully immersed in it. The days in London had started to feel like a rhythm I was slowly learning to dance to. Every morning, I woke with a sense of purpose and curiosity. The city that had once felt distant and overwhelming now felt alive with possibilities I could reach out and touch. Yet, even with all the excitement, I knew this part of the journey would be different. It would not just be about sightseeing or learning English, but about discovering who I was in a city so vast and full of life. One of my first challenges was navigating the city. Alone for extended periods, London is enormous, and even with maps, directions, and the underground system, it was easy to get lost. On my first day of trying to explore East London, I stepped out of the tube station and realized I had no idea where I was. Street signs seemed familiar yet strange, and the hustle of people made me anxious. I took a deep breath, remembered what I had learned in the past weeks, and slowly began to retrace my steps, asking locals for directions. The kindness of strangers surprised me. A woman waiting for her bus noticed my confusion and walked part of the way with me, pointing out landmarks and small cafes along the street. That small act of guidance taught me something essential. Vulnerability can open doors, and asking for help is never a weakness. From that day, I made it a habit to approach challenges with curiosity rather than fear. If I got lost, I explored. If I struggled to understand English, I listened carefully, repeated phrases, and gradually built confidence. Each small victory, like ordering food without hesitation or asking for directions, gave me a sense of accomplishment. These moments were more than practical, they were lessons in courage, patience, and persistence. One afternoon, I decided to visit Greenwich. I had read about the Prime Meridian, the Royal Observatory, and the beautiful parks with views of the Thames. The journey required multiple forms of transport: underground trains, buses, and even a riverboat. I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as I navigated the transfers, but I reminded myself to enjoy the process. London was full of movement, and I was learning to move with it, step by step. Arriving in Greenwich, I felt a quiet sense of awe. The historic buildings, the green hills, and the panoramic views of the river were breathtaking. Standing on the line of the Prime Meridian, I imagined the invisible line dividing the world into east and west. It was symbolic, somehow, of my own journey, stepping into a new life while carrying my past with me. I wandered the streets, visited small shops, and tasted local pastries. Every detail mattered: the crunch of the bread, the warmth of the tea, the laughter of children playing in the park. London was teaching me to appreciate life in its smallest, richest details. On the boat ride back, I sat near the window, watching the city glide past. Skyscrapers, bridges, and historic buildings passed by in a blur, and I realized that this was a city that refused to stay still. Its energy was constant, and I had learned to flow with it. I felt proud of how far I had come, both in navigating the city and in understanding its rhythm. One evening, I attended a small writing workshop in a local library. Writing had always been my way of understanding the world, and now I had the opportunity to connect with other people who shared the same passion. The room was filled with writers of all ages, some professionals, some amateurs, all eager to share stories. When it was my turn, I read a short piece about my experiences in London: the markets, the museums, the riverbanks, the small acts of kindness I had encountered. The group listened attentively and applauded. Their encouragement gave me confidence not only in my writing, but also in myself. I realized that travel was not just about observing, it was also about sharing, connecting, and contributing to the community around you. That same week, I met someone who would become a close friend during my stay. Her name was Emily, a young woman who worked at a small cafe in Notting Hill. We met when I asked for a recommendation for a pastry. and our conversation flowed easily. Over the following days, we explored parts of the city together, hidden parks, quirky shops, and quiet streets away from the crowds. She introduced me to local customs, shared stories about growing up in London, and even helped me practice my English in natural, flowing conversation. Emily's friendship made me feel less like a visitor and more like a part of the city itself. Of course, not every day was perfect. Living in a foreign city brought moments of loneliness and homesickness. Some nights, I would lie in bed, missing my family, missing familiar streets and familiar food. I would call home, speak with my loved ones, and feel both relief and longing. These feelings, I realized, were natural. They reminded me that while I was discovering London, I was also discovering myself. I learned to embrace these emotions, letting them deepen my appreciation for both my home and the new city I was exploring. One rainy afternoon, I found myself wandering the streets near Shoreditch, umbrella in hand, listening to the soft patter of rain on the pavement. The city looked different in the rain, reflections shimmered on the wet streets. Street art became more vivid, and the air smelled clean and fresh. I ducked into a small bookstore, seeking shelter, and spent hours browsing. The rain outside became a companion, a quiet presence that made the experience even more intimate. By the time I stepped out, I realized that even challenging weather could offer moments of beauty and reflection. My adventures also took me to museums I had not yet visited: the Victoria and Albert Museum, with its intricate art collections, and the Science Museum, where interactive exhibits brought learning to life. I marveled at how London offered something for everyone, whether history, art, science, or culture. I learned to pace myself, to appreciate the journey rather than rush through it. Walking through these spaces, I often paused to observe people, their reactions, their curiosity, their joy. I realized that travel was as much about understanding people as it was about seeing places. On weekends, I explored farther, taking trains to nearby towns like Oxford and Cambridge. These trips gave me perspective on London itself. Seeing smaller towns with quiet streets, historic colleges, and peaceful parks helped me appreciate the city's unique energy. London was vast, loud, and full of life, but it was also surrounded by calm, reflective spaces. These day trips reminded me of balance, a need to explore, yet also the need to pause and reflect. As weeks turned into months, I noticed subtle changes in myself. My English improved, my confidence grew, and I began to navigate the city with ease. I learned the nuances of British culture, from polite phrases to tipping customs, from public transportation etiquette to local festivals. I even started recognizing faces in cafes and shops, forming small connections that made the city feel more like a community. One memorable moment was during a summer festival near the South Bank. Music filled the streets, performers entertained, crowds and food stalls offered tastes from around the world. I wandered through, sampling dishes I had never tried before and laughing with people I had just met. That day, I felt completely at home in a city that had once felt so foreign. I realized that belonging was not about living in a place permanently. It was about fully engaging with it, embracing its rhythm, and allowing yourself to grow alongside it. Of course, there were moments of failure and frustration. Once, I missed an important train because I misread the schedule. Another time, I struggled to communicate with a shopkeeper, feeling clumsy and awkward. But each mistake was a lesson. I learned patience, resilience, and the importance of perspective. London was teaching me not just about the city, but about life itself, about how to face challenges, how to adapt, and how to celebrate small victories. By the end of my stay, I had a routine of reflection. Every evening, I would sit near the river, write in my notebook, and replay the day in my mind. I remembered the first moment I arrived, the nervous excitement, the awe, the overwhelming feeling of entering a dream. Now, as I reflected, I realized how much I had grown. I had not just seen London, I had lived it. I had walked its streets, met its people, tasted its food, and immersed myself in its culture. I had faced challenges, embraced opportunities, and discovered a new sense of confidence and independence. The last evening in London was bittersweet. I walked along the South Bank one final time, watching the city lights shimmer on the water. The London eye turned slowly, the sound of distant music drifted across the river, and I felt a deep gratitude. I had experienced so much, so many moments, big and small, that would remain with me forever. As I sat on a bench, I made a promise to myself. I will carry London with me always, not just in memories, but in the courage, curiosity, and joy it has taught me. I realized that the city had changed me, It had shown me the value of exploration, the importance of connection, and the power of embracing life fully. The next morning, I packed my suitcase for the journey home. My flight awaited, but I did not feel sad. I felt enriched, transformed, and inspired. London had become more than a city. I visited it, had become a part of who I was. On the plane, I looked out the window one last time. The city below slowly receded into the clouds, and I smiled, remembering every street, every face, every small joy I had encountered. I knew that this journey was only the beginning of many adventures to come. London had taught me not just how to travel, but how to live with curiosity, courage, and gratitude. And as the plane soared into the sky, I whispered to myself, "Thank you, London. I will never forget you."